The Instructor podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
So welcome to another episode of the Instructor podcast. And today I am joined by the delightful Ray Seagrave. Thank you for joining us, Ray. How are you today?
I'm fine. Thank you, Terry. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm really excited to be here.
No, it's great to have you on. You were someone that I kind of stumbled across, if you like, when I was recording season 1 of this show. And I'm like, I want Ray on. But I've got season 1 planned. Now I've got to wait all the way to season 2 to get him on. So I'm pleased I've got you on at long last. So I'm going to start you off with the thing that I like to ask everyone. So rather than me introduce you, I like you to introduce yourself, because I know I like to know what matters to you. So if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. So tell us a bit about your background and about what you're up to now. That would be awesome.
Yeah, sure. I think my background's probably very similar to a lot of ADIs and PDIs that are listening. Well, I started about 11 years ago, and I was in a job that I must say was quite well paid at the time, but as a manager of staff, but it wasn't very fulfilling. And my kids were growing up. I was losing time with them, and I was looking around for something that would help me to achieve some personal goals, plus see more time with my children. So I decided to take a change, and I was looking for something that could pay the mortgage and also mean that I could spend some more time with my kids, because I was missing them. I thought, well, I can drive. I've been driving for probably almost 25 years at that time. I've done a lot of mileage. I've also driven abroad, so I had that in my mind. So I thought, yeah, well, I've been an okay driver. Someone in a previous life said to me, Ray, I think you would be a good teacher. I don't know whether they were trying to get rid of me, but I sort of considered that at the time, because I never really thought about myself as someone that would be good in that particular area. So this came about, and we decided, my wife and I at the time, that we wanted to foster children. So that gave us an opportunity to spend more time with our own children and give something back to some unfortunate kids that weren't in a as good a place as anyone would normally think. And I gave up my day job as it was, and but before I did that, I started some training, and then I decided, I was a bit worried about it, because I thought, well, I've got a mortgage to pay here. You know, it's a bit of a leap of faith, and I'm sure there's people listening that would sympathise with that. I had to trust myself. But I knew that anything that I go into, and this is anything in my life, I've always tried to be the best that I can be. Not the best, but the best that I can be. But never gone into anything without that 110% commitment, which is why I've been the sort of person that have looked around for the best trainers. I've been the sort of person that looks around for the best opportunities. And if you think about my own particular learning style and the type of person I am, I'm very much a reflector. I seek out knowledge and understanding before I make a decision. I would say my life's changed a lot more now. I think I tend to make more decisions with my heart rather than my head. So I delved into the world of driving tuition, and I was so pleased that I did that, because it lit a fire inside that I really has lasted me like an everlasting flame. It's always been there, and that fire of passion and wanting to really help others, not just achieve, but help them to achieve something that means not just short-term goals. Things like extra mobility, or I can get here now. I can get a better job prospects. But make the sort of changes in their life that it did for me when I learned to drive. So I became that driving instructor with a bit of trepidation at the time, but then found out that I enjoyed every single bit of it. But I went into it thinking that I wanted to do the best I really could for my pupils. So I was very passionate about that, and I'm sure there are lots of people listening that can relate to that. Because I wanted the best for them. So that was way back then. It was about 11 years ago. And it was through, I qualified through the old PSTs, the old Part 3 system, which was a different system we have now, of course. And And after about 6 months, I wanted to give the job up. Well, you might say, well, why is that? Well, I thought the training that I'd received at that time was to pass a test. And I thought that the old PST system, the preset tests, the old Part 3 as it was very prescriptive. And it wasn't like any training that really I'd been involved in before, which from my background was more of a coaching type background. I really discovered that actually I was a coach. And I subsequently went on and did courses around coaching prior to becoming a driving instructor. So I had to think long and hard about what my future was, and I deliberated on it for a long time. Because like I said to you earlier, if I'm going to commit to something, it's got to be 110%. And then I started to look around. I said, well, this can't be it. The way I've been trained is very prescriptive. It's here's a brief. You tell your pupil this, you tell your pupil that, you then do this, you then do that. And there's very little client-centered training going on at all, which is pretty much what I was used to, and helping people find solutions for themselves, which for me was so much more powerful because the learning comes from within. It comes from within them. It's nothing that you prescribe. And that's much more powerful when a pupil discovers that they did it rather than you told them what to do. So I did look around and I thought, well, actually, there are some changes I can see coming up. And the DSA at that time were involved in a project in Europe called the Hermes Project. And that was really looking into how driver training was delivered all around Europe. And the DSA were involved in that. And there was representation from the UK instructor industry. And out of that came the Hermes report and some recommendations on how the industry should change. So having seen that and looked at what training providers were thinking about and how the changes would come in the industry, that started to excite me again, because I saw then opportunities for change that would mean that the industry would, almost like a tsunami of change, would affect the industry and push it forward, was my view. Push it forward in towards the pupil, towards the client, towards the person that really needs to be discovering solutions rather than them handed to them. Because the power of that meant that as trainers now, we could start to talk about the things that really did matter, which is not that do this and you'll pass a driving test. It was more to do with consequences. It was more to do with behaviors, because people can learn to drive, but after the driving test, it's really our attitude and our behavior and our thoughts and our underlying social beliefs, our own personal beliefs, that determine how we drive the car. And of course, my experience told me that only really coaching was probably the best way to do that, because the types of questions that would be being asked would really delve deep into a person's character, the way that they were, and how might they act after the driving test. So that excited me. I was really excited for the change. So I decided to stay. I sought out some trainers that were like-minded, and I embarked on a personal journey of continuous professional development, CPD is what I like to call it. And I set out to, once I was excited by seeing this change at that time, then I thought, right, okay, if I'm good at this, I'd like to train others to be really good at it. I'd like to become a trainer, to pass the message on further, to really have a look at how we could deliver that message home about putting the client in the center of things and helping them understand their own personalities and helping them to have a choice effectively. They can go down a path that would lead them to higher risk in their driving, or with an understanding of consequences, they could go down a path that would mean that they would be safer, their passengers would be safer, and people around them, other road users, would be safer. Not because, because a driving instructor is telling them, do this and you'll be safer, because the messages that you are talking about touch them, touch them in their head, and they touch them in their soul. They understand that their behavior and the consequences of that could be the difference between a life or death decision. And for someone that's passionate about the safety figures we see, the KSIs, the killed and seriously injured on today's roads, for someone passionate about trying to see those reduce, and for someone passionate about the person next to you, and helping them achieve their goals, I think that's for me, that was a number one focus. So I pushed on, and with now a mission. So my mission was to try and be the best that I could be, and not be the best because we were on a learning journey, and I know I learn something every day, and I'm open to learning new things every day, and that keeps me excited about the future. It keeps doors open. And it seeks out opportunities, which is what we're helping our pupils look for every day, and when we have conversations with them in the car, isn't it? So I passed my part 3 as it was then. I was a grade 5, and I thought, well, what do I need to do to get better? And then the new standards check came in. So by the time I took my next assessment, some of the changes were being put in place. And I was pleased to say that because I was aware of them and done some personal development around coaching. I did a BTEC 4 at the time, and I really enjoyed that. There was some great stuff in there that I took forward into the car. And then I went through the first of the standards check, not knowing really how well I would do, but happy that I was doing the right things. But I was doing the right things for the right reasons. I think when you focus on what the result needs to be, not the result for you, I'm talking about the result for the pupil. When you focus on what the pupil result you're looking for, then your training will ultimately be focused on them, which was the essence of what was coming in and the new changes. So then fast forward, I've spent some time really learning the craft and understanding 5 things, which I'll give you a little bit later. There are 5 things around CPD, which I can talk about that have really helped me along my journey. And I'd like to share those with the listeners, so we can talk about that a little later. But then pushing on, I decided that I really wanted to go for train the trainer. So I wanted to pass those messages on. I became an audit registered trainer a few years ago, with the view to, again, trying to help PDIs and ADIs that hadn't heard those messages before or hadn't been trained in a way that would maybe trained in the old system, or perhaps their training lacks some of the things that they needed to deliver behavioral change in the car with pupils, really help them grow their understanding and really the power of what we do. We're so influential. Sometimes I have to tell myself that when we are sat next to someone, sometimes we can lose the sight that we are highly influential in terms of our demeanor, what we demonstrate, what we say, how we react, our attitude towards things. All these things are seen by the pupil, but also on a subconscious level, they're taken in. So if we deliver what we say we want to deliver, we've got to believe it as well. So I've been an audit registered trainer now for a number of years, and I really enjoy working with ADIs and PDIs in the car to open up this world of understanding of how we can help pupils really with life after the driving test in ways that perhaps the pupil themselves don't even realize. So that brings us to today.
and this is obviously a highlight of your entire career being on this show.
Of course.
There's a lot of things you said that really resonated there. And I want to touch on a couple of points to begin with. That last one you made there about setting the bar so high and expecting so much of yourself and then potentially never being satisfied. I think that's I have that as a good quality, but it's also a way of beating yourself up in a way, and because that's something that I struggle with. In fact, there's a quick example for that. I had a guest on the previous season of the show called Natalia De Picastra, and she'd set a challenge for herself to appear on 100 different podcasts this year. And she commented on one of my posts yesterday, actually, as we record this, and she told me she'd been on 47 podcasts, and I was in her top 5.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yeah.
Except I spent 20 minutes beating myself up that she didn't say number 1. You know? And I had to step back and be like, no, that's great. You're in the top 5.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting how, you know, someone like yourself and a lot of people, we're never satisfied. Where do you think that stems from? That idea of just not quite achieving what you want to achieve, even though what you've achieved is phenomenal?
Well, I think, but first of all, I do see it as a positive quality, like yourself. But it's like anything. When you become aware of something and understand the reasons why, you can then begin to manage it. And and it's a great example because pupils have this in the car, don't they? You know, sometimes a pupil will set the bar high, and you may, working on your agenda in your mind, you might be thinking, wow, this pupil's had a great lesson. And then maybe you're at the side of the road and you're soliciting some feedback, you're asking a few questions, and they're on a downer about things. And then then you beat yourself up because then you think, well, why didn't I realize that? Yeah. So there's learning and there's feedback happening all the time. But when I've discussed this with people, particularly people that I'm training, I talk about setting a high bar. It is a double-edged sword, isn't it? You've got you are challenging yourself to quite a high level, but also you can be frustrated by not achieving. But to come to peace with yourself about what you've achieved so far, it's great to look back, because looking back is a great source of what's the word? It's a great sort of motivation to keep going, and to sometimes maybe not set the bar so high, to be realistic. Now, when we're goal setting in a car, we have these conversations with our pupils, don't we? You know, about the goal that they're setting and the realistic nature of it, and breaking goals down. So I make no apologies for setting a high goal. What would be the wrong thing to do, I think, is set a high goal without a way to get there.
Yeah.
And if you break that down and work on those goal steps, then you're always achieving something. And that one thing you're achieving then makes you one step closer to achieving the wider goal, the bigger goal.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I just touched on something else you said previously as well. We mentioned about the preparing the students for life after the driving test, for driving rather than the test. And I think that's massive. And that's something that every lesson I do, I focus more on. Every lesson I do, I come more away from being a test-centric instructor and more about teaching people to drive after. And I was having a conversation with a former student yesterday, and she was telling me that, like, 5 days after she passed her test, she drove to Scarborough and back. And she was then telling me that her sister, who passed quicker than she did, but with a different instructor, doesn't leave Bradford. And I think that really resonates, because, again, I'm not meaning to say that guy was a bad instructor, I'm a good instructor, or anything like that. But I think one of those people was prepared and trained to go and drive. And the other one was prepared and trained to drive in an area, or prepared and trained to pass a test. And I think that's something that really clicked with me talking to her yesterday. It's like, yeah, I felt confident driving to Scarborough. Of course, there was a little bit of nerves, but I felt confident just getting in my car and I'm driving to Scarborough. And I thought, how awesome is that? And that's the goal. You know, your test, passing a test essentially gives you a document that you can do it legally. It doesn't mean you can actually do it. It means you can do it legally. It's after that. So I just wonder if you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I when the driving test was 80 years old, a couple of years ago now, I did a radio interview for the local BBC Coventry and Warwickshire radio. And I remember saying at the time that they were talking about how, and we have this, don't we, where test pass rates vary across the country. Yeah. And they were saying, well, if a pass rate is higher in one particular place, why won't pupils go there? And I said, well, really, what we are preparing our pupils to do is drive safely for life. So whenever, when they get, like you say, that certificate that enables them to do that legally, that they should have the confidence to be able to drive anywhere. I said that, there are people here now listening to this show, back then in the radio, and I said that would probably break out into a sweat if they thought they had to drive to London today. And yet there are people pass their driving test in London every day. So I think the burden, and for me, it feels like a burden, because if I'm not talking about life after the driving test, I don't personally think I'm doing my job properly. This is where I'm coming from. Because it's not about helping a pupil move a lump of metal from A to B and to negotiate the local area. It's about giving them the skill set to be able to take on board their learning to date and be able to apply what they've learned in a new situation and be able to do that safely with a plan A and a plan B, and to be able to drive anywhere. And the thing that taught me that the most was when I talked about when I passed my test earlier, a bit of a life lesson here. But I got that my first job, and I just turned 19, and my boss came to me and he said, "Oh, Ray," he says, "you can drive, can't you?" And I went, "Yeah, but I've only passed my test a year and I've not driven since then." He said, "Oh, yeah, but you can drive, can't you? You've got a license, haven't you?" I went, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, I have, yeah." He said, "Well, could you just take this parcel to a customer?" I said, "Well, okay," a bit nervously. I said, "Well, okay, whereabouts are they?" Thinking they're going to be 5 miles down the road. He said, "Oh, they're in London." And I went, "What, that they're London, about 70 miles away?" He said, "Yeah, you can take my car." And I went, "What, that brand new executive car in the car park?" So he said, "Yeah, you'll be all right. Here you go. Here's the keys." He's obviously in a panic. But I did make that trip. And I did. And I remember it. And I remember it for how I prepared myself for it, but also how I really thought about what I was doing. I took the pressure off. It didn't matter if I went the wrong way because I gave myself plenty of time, and how I planned the route out. And these were life skills that were in place at the time that allowed me to do that successfully. Yes, with a bit of nervousness, but able to get back safely in one piece. And I don't remember having any issues with doing the wrong thing. I remember going the wrong way a couple of times, but it didn't matter. And I always have that in the back of my mind, because since I passed my driving test and I worked this out the other day, to the present day, there've been something like 1.4 million people that have been killed or seriously injured. So since I passed my driving test to this present day, 1.4 million people have been killed or seriously injured.
How long ago did you pass your driving test?
1983.
That was a year after I was born.
Was it? Yeah. And that's 1.4 million surrounding families that received some bad news. And that's a statistic that I'm quite happily able to talk to a pupil about as around a consequence. Because I think we should be definitely having those conversations, because they help pupils make choices. But they've got to be more realistic to them about, where might they go after their driving test? Where might they travel to? Where might they be called to in an emergency, possibly? Where do their family live? How often might they make a journey in the evening or the night, or in snow or in ice? How might they do something differently when they're lost? How might they behave when someone acts aggressively towards them? How might they behave when no one's looking, when I'm not sat there? How might they behave when their friends are in the back? So these are all conversations that have to happen, because it helps them prepare them for a driving life after the driving test.
A student of mine made a really interesting comment the other day. I'd got a temporary car because someone had crashed into mine, and I'd been in the boot, and the boot in this temporary car didn't open all the way by itself. whereas my car does. So it kind of opened halfway. And when I set up, I cracked my head on boot. And my student just looked at me and went, I know I'm not allowed, but if you had to go to hospital now, I could drive you. And I thought, that's really, I like that you've said that. That's what you're training them for. Yeah. It's not to pass a test. And again, I know legally he won't be allowed because he was a learner, but I thought I don't think I've been as proud in that sense. Yeah. I mean, I wish they'd been a bit more concerned about me, but I was really proud of that. And the statistic you mentioned there about 1.4 million in the last, what would that be, 37 years?
Yeah.
That's quite daunting. I mean, I regularly use the one sort of on average 5 people a day die on, but that number I'd not kind of totaled it up like that for the deaths and the serious injuries, and that's quite scary. But just touching on the other thing you said about students being able to do anything afterwards, and yes, there'll be some fear and trepidation there, but the ability will be there, and the self-belief. I think it's finding out sometimes whether you're actually scared or whether you just don't like it, because that come from a self-reflective thing with me, and I was thinking a while ago that I would be too scared to drive around London. I was, me as a driving instructor, was thinking that. Then when I thought about, no, it's not that I'd be scared. I just don't like the idea of it. It just looks really unpleasant, driving around there. Yeah. And when you take the fun away, all of a sudden it becomes less enjoyable. And I think if you can get your students sometimes to look and think, is it that you're actually scared of that thing, or is it just that it's a bit harder and you won't enjoy it? Yeah. And then that helps them break it down as well. But the other thing you mentioned there, like you mentioned a couple of times, was pass rates. And that's something that obviously in our industry gets spoken about a lot. I would be interested in your thoughts on pass rates of individual instructors, in terms of I'm of the belief that the sort of the national pass rate is too low, in the sense of we should, more than half of people should be passing the driving test. If they're not, we're doing something wrong there as a collective. I believe that, and I'm contributing towards that as well, clearly. But I'd be interested in your thoughts on pass rates for individual instructors, as in, are they relevant? Should they play a part, whether that's a part in people getting standard checks put upon them, or any kind of monitoring, or is the pass rate for individual instructors almost irrelevant and shouldn't be paid attention to because everyone's different?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. That the overall pass rate course, not everyone goes with a driving school, do they? So there's elements of private practice and private. I haven't done the numbers on it, so I couldn't quote your percentage, but there's that in there. For anyone that I train, even when I've trained pupils, they're learning to drive. The test has not even been a consideration, and it's one of the questions that we get asked, isn't it, as an industry? What's your pass rate? I tend to think there that it shouldn't be about the test, actually, and I know the DVS say that they need a way of monitoring the industry. So the question would be, well, how else would they do it? And there is a certain amount of monitoring of an instructor pass rate, and might they get called back for a standards check and stuff like that. When I think about tests and I think about pass rates, I go straight back to, well, why would you want to worry about them if you're doing a good job, and you are? Because ultimately, you're not doing, are you? It's your pupil that's doing it. But the degree to which you're doing well with helping your pupil discover how to drive safely, but also manage their own emotions, because preparing someone for a test is also part of it, I think. And there are some people that fear tests, aren't they? And you mentioned fears. This fear of the unknown is one thing that causes anxiety. Fear of failure, another thing that causes anxiety. The pressure that's built up from surrounding people, and they all have impact on performance, don't they? So as good a job as you do with helping a pupil learn how to drive safely for life and manage behaviors, you're preparing them for that life after the test. So when they go into an area where they're unfamiliar with, their anxiety is going to go up a little bit, but they're confident that they can think and plan ahead. They've got satellite navigation. They're thinking about line signs and information. They're really focused and engaged 100% with the road. They're taking their time. They've got a plan B. Then they're all skills that you are helping them. So when they come to their driving test, then they're more likely to be successful, and more likely to be successful on the first attempt. Not that even attempts is important, because we can all have a bad day, can't we?
Yeah.
Even on a standards check or a part 3, we can have a bad day in the office. So we are. Sometimes I think we are very focused on tests and pass rates, and that can permeate through to parents and pupils. But I absolutely understand that the DVSA have to have a way of monitoring, and because they report to the DFT, a government body, they've got something that they need to be able to say, well, this is happening here and that's happening there, and there's development here, and there's a new standards check coming in here. So that starts right from day one, I think, in the car. So whenever in the past I've been asked about a pass rate, I've always said, well, the objective here, the goal here is that your son or your daughter learns to drive safely for life, and if they and I do a good job helping them do that, then they're likely to be more successful on the first attempt. But if that's not possible, then it's going to happen. But if you want to speak to any past pupils of mine, then you're more than happy to do that. I've got this. I've got this passion about it's about what you do, not a pass rate. And if you do your job well, your pass rate will be what it is. If that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a good way of looking at it. I'll, being completely honest, when I first started, I wouldn't say test centric. I always wanted people to be able to drive after the test. The example I gave with my previous student before, she was a few years ago, but I was more test centric than I am now. And like I said, as I'm now starting to see the importance and significance, and a lot of that stems from the interaction I have with other instructors, whether that's been online or what I've seen written in different forums, or whether it's speaking to people at the test centre. But I think there's an element there of you spoke about the DVSA as well, and they've got to assess it somehow. So we are getting assessed on our pass rate. There is an element, I mean, not strictly, but there's an element of that there. So I think that we can, like for me personally, I think I will never, unless something changes significantly, I won't be able to remove that completely out of my psyche, because I know that someone else is looking at that pass rate. So I need to be aware of what it is in that sense. Yeah. But I also completely concur with what you're saying, that if I'm doing my job properly, the pass rate will look after itself.
Yeah. And I think, it's where we anchor things. We have anchor points, don't we? And we can, there are positive and negative things the way that we think. And it's like when you're helping a pupil to prepare themselves for the big day, as they might call it, and they can anchor their thoughts on some negative outcomes, can't they? Oh, I'm gonna be rubbish. I'm gonna make lots of mistakes. It's all gonna go wrong. I'm gonna panic. I'm gonna fail. Yeah. But then if they're now in a more positive frame of mind, which is where they're anchoring their thoughts on what's going to go well and why, what is it I need to do? How is it I need to think? If there's a little thing I need to remember to do, I need to remember it. I'm thinking more about what I need to do to make things go well, then hey presto, you haven't got to worry about what might go wrong. because generally it's going to go well. So I think as a focus in terms of our training, if we are focused on the pupil, what their goals are, what they want to achieve and how they're going to achieve them, we do a really good job there. We don't get any worries about being picked up on a pass rate, because we're going to be as successful as our pupils are, and we've helped facilitate that.
That's good advice for life as well. So I hope you're enjoying this episode. We're just taking a short break for a moment to say thank you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting the show. If you're enjoying it, I'm going to ask you to do me one or possibly two favors. First of all, go and hit subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. Give it a like, give it a share on social media. And if you're feeling extra generous, go and leave me a nice little 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts. The second thing you could do would be to go out and check out our Patreon feed. Now, Patreon is an audio hosting place where I'm putting extra videos, extra audio files, extra written files. So you can go over there and check out all our bonus stuff. That's at patreon.com/the Instructor. And you can also find the link to that in the show notes and also on all my social media stuff. So go check out the Patreon feed for all the bonus features, like the Green Room, which will be available every week, where we cover the latest news around the industry. But for now, let's get back to the show. I'm going to take a slight detour there and go back to something you said very, very early on. And I think I heard this correctly. I've noted it down, that you fostered some children. The reason I'm coming back to that is because I've got an awful lot of respect. I'm a stepdad. I don't have any biological children, but I've got a stepson who's obviously my wife's son. We can't have children. We considered fostering for a while, but I couldn't bring myself to go down that route. The idea of taking someone in and letting someone go. So I think someone that can do that, I've got the utmost respect, and I think that's very, very brave. I wonder if you just mind sharing a little bit about that, about how you found that experience. I know that's coming away from what we're talking about, but I think it's fascinating.
Well, yes, and I can understand, but actually it's taught me a hell of a lot about this business, to be honest, and I'll touch on that. Just coming at it from the fostering perspective, I think given those I know within this industry now, we enter this industry generally because we care. Would you say, Terry? Yeah, we care. We're caring people. We care about others and their success. We do this with passion, and so generally we are caring people. And then all of a sudden, this person at the side of us, we might have had them for a few hours, and we've got to know them a little bit, and actually we're great friends, aren't we? And and for some it's it's almost like a complete cutoff. We first of all had a load of hours with Terry, great bloke, really got on with. In fact, Terry was my mentor. I'm going to miss Terry, but I'm going to take the lessons that Terry taught me, and I'm going to try and apply those, because I've had a great time. And I've really learned a lot. And that's the experience with fostering. You go into it with an outcome in mind. And the outcome in mind was, and there's other reasons why I'll touch just a little bit on what else it's taught me about people. But the outcome in mind is that you are going to help this person on the next step in their life. You are going to give them the tools. You're going to give them the confidence. You're going to give them some ground rules, and you're going to give them some background and some stability to help work out problems in the future, to a point where you are happy to let them go, so they can then, in an excited way, go and discover the rest of their life. So there's a little bit of a comparison there. But the big thing that fostering taught me was that you should never assume you know about a person. You should, and when you get a person you're teaching to drive, you don't really know their background. Some of their background they will never ever share with anyone. Never mind, not that you expect them to. But you know that some pupils will tell you, well, I feel a bit down today. I've just had an argument with so and so, and they'll go into a story, won't they? So I've never assumed anything about anyone. And there's, when you go into fostering, there are some really positive things about how people have turned their negative experience around and gone on to achieve some fantastic things in their life. And that's the same in the car. You're in a professional relationship that's safeguarded, and you are there to help them. But when you think about rapport and developing rapport and trust, there are some people that go through negative experiences in their life will mean that is very difficult in the short term when they meet you. Yeah. And I think that's all about being patient, being trustworthy, and being consistent. Because if we are to understand in a coaching type relationship in car, and we're asking questions like, what went well, what didn't go so well, what would you do differently next time? For some people that have been used to having negative feedback, you're stupid, what are you saying that for? You've never been any good, you've never going to amount to anything, what you're going to say next is going to be wrong. Then it's very difficult, and they put up this wall. They can put up a wall, which means that it can be very tricky to break that down. But in time, they come to trust that you are not going to give that negative feedback. You are not going to be that person that's going to be putting them back and putting them down, that you are there to try and help them grow and develop. So whenever and I can think of a number in the past of pupils where it's taken me quite a long time to gain that trust. But that T word, trust, is one of the big things that will mean that they will give you an honest answer to a question when you talk about how do you think you might drive when I'm not with you? Because it's an honest answer you want from that. So you can help talk about an attitude that will keep them safe going forward. So it's taught me a lot.
I can imagine. And I mean, just listening to there, I'm now thinking, maybe I'll rethink my thoughts on the foster process, because you're right. There is obviously it's two different levels of extreme, if you like, but there is a similarity there between fostering and learning to drive. You take someone in your car, you take that person on board, you form a relationship a lot of times, or a bond, or like trust. You form a mutual trust and a mutual respect, and then that person goes, and it's always a little bit sad, isn't it, when you drop them off for that last, after the test, you drop them off and then they get out of the car and they're all happy and they're running to see their mum. They don't look back because they're waving the test pass certificate. It's always a little bit sad, like, oh, have fun with the rest of your life.
Yeah, of course it is. And that's because, we care. And that's where we've got to say, well, great, I've done my job. And now, hopefully, they've got a choice now, haven't they? They've got a blue pill or a red pill if you're into the matrix. Yeah. They can choose a certain path and understand what the consequences are around that choice, or they can choose another path, and with the same understanding of consequences, they can now make a better informed choice. And if we do a good enough job to help them understand what those choices are, just by doing that and having those conversations means that they're now going to be, in my view, less risky than before.
I'm going to go make that as a meme after this conversation. Bringing it back around to CPD then, which I know is one of your drivers, one of your passions, if you like. And you mentioned before about the 5 things that you were going to mention, but just before you sort of come back with that, or that might answer the questions actually. CPD, continued professional development. Why do you think that's important? And why do you think a lot of driving instructors, and I suppose this applies for every industry really, but a lot of people don't actually do it or don't want to do it?
Well, yeah, it's a really good question. When I passed my part 3, I felt a little bit alone, to be honest. I was sort of set off on a path. There you go. And it can be a very lonely business.
Yeah.
If that's what you choose. The problem with being out there on your own or alone or not in touch with what's happening with the industry is that quite soon you can be left behind, because if there's one thing certain in this life, in this world, is that change will always happen. And I've always thought, me personally, I wanted to remain ahead of those changes, because then I remained trying to be the best that I could be. I wanted to understand how the industry was changing, what new things were coming out, if there were any new things coming out, how my own personal skills might need to grow, develop, and change. Because I had a growth mindset. I had but I absolutely understand that not everyone is like that. And that's fine. Some people are happy to work for a franchise maybe, and they will do that job for 10 years. They're happy to teach, and they're happy to pay the franchise fee, and they don't want to get involved in marketing, don't want to run their own business. They're just happy to do that and happy to go the way that they're going. And that's fine. But from a personal development level, you can quite easily get left behind. And then when I mentioned earlier, when the changes happened in the industry, we went from the old PST Part 3 system to the new standards check, and the new Part 3 followed on after that. It was like a tsunami of change. There was all of us. It wasn't overnight, but it felt like it was completely different now. And there was a lot of people at the time needed to reskill, get to understand what this client-centered thing was all about, and what tools they needed to understand and pass a standards check or a new Part 3, to even get to grips with the new driver and rider standard. So if you are running a business, then I think part of your responsibility, which we all run businesses, don't we? Part of your responsibility, I think, is to look a little bit into the future, to try and understand where change might come from, so you can prepare yourself for that. Because ultimately, there's as we run businesses, there's an income, and we want to protect our income. We also want to grow and develop, and some of us go on to aspire to bigger things, like run our own driving school. So being close to the industry. Just to even go to the occasional show. There's the big Intelligent Instructor show coming up in October. I'll be presenting there, so if you want to come along and join me, I'll be happy to see you. But shows like that, just once a year, just to keep touch base with what's happening, I think is invaluable, because it certainly was invaluable to me. You've got a choice then. You can decide what's out there, have a look around, and work out where you are now and what you need to do to improve. There's nothing like the great feeling after you've passed a standards check, is there? But wouldn't it be great to say, well, that was effortless, rather than I had to do something to do that? I don't think we all should have to do something new to pass a standards check. I think that what we're doing already should far and exceed a passing a standards check. And that's because we focus on being the best that we can be. Not for us. Well, it depends where your passions lie, but my passions lie with the end result, the pupil, and their safety after the driving test. But thinking about we care, and we care for those people that leave us, and that's who I'm doing it for. That's who we generally, most of us, do it for, to keep abreast of what's happening. But so I think I think it's important. It certainly helped me in my development, and as well as continual professional development, I would also say continual personal development, because there's how our own personalities grow and develop, and how we're better able to cope with the people that we see every single day that come from different walks of life and with different learning abilities. How we can move into SEN or move into drivers with different abilities that may be limited. They're all exciting developments, and with an open thought process as to where might your own career develop, or what might you like to grow and develop into. Keeping your mind open to personal development and professional development is a great way of helping you do that.
Yeah, I think I concur with all that again, and you raised some really interesting points again. I think that I'd not looked at it that way before, almost keeping your finger on the pulse of the industry and seeing where it's going. Because I remember when I passed my Part 3 to become an instructor, I took the old style Part 3. And my initial thing was, right, I'm going to take a year. I'm going to take a year just to settle down, just to be with my students, just to not develop, but settle into being an instructor. And then 5 months later, I got my standards check, and it was the new standards check.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I hadn't prepared for that. I know that the principles are still the same from the old Part 3 to the new one, but it's different. It was different. And I went from, when I passed my Part 3, if I remember correctly, I got over the 2 parts, I got a 5 and a 6. And then when I went for the standards check, I dropped down to quite a low B. And part of that was because I wasn't prepared for it. And I just allowed myself to rest on my laurels too much that time. And that was a kick up the backside for me, just to be like, right, come on, you can move forward. And I think it also ties into a little bit what you're saying there around CPD, because whether it's professional or personal development, I think people, including the way I used to be, have this idea that it's either learning to coach or running your own driving school. It's one, and it's not. It's so much more than that. There's so many different facets to it. So, in fact, I'm going to throw this one out to you as well. What other examples would you throw there? Because to me, reading certain books is CPD. It might not be, classified as such by the DVSA, but you're still developing. Whether that's an industry-specific one, or maybe a book on marketing or whatever it is. So I just wondered if you could throw some other examples our way there.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about the nature of your business, there's, you run your own business, don't we? We all run our own businesses. We are, some of us work for a franchise, but we're all self-employed. So if you think about how you would grow your business, so there's, development skills in sales, in marketing, even, Facebook marketing, things like social media marketing, if that's what you're interested in, and growing your business using those methods is something that floats your boat, or something where you want to get more understanding of and better at, aligned with what your business goals are, because we've got business goals and our personal goals, and the better we are at achieving our personal goals, we're more likely to achieve our business goals. So anything to do with the growth of the business, but then personal professional development around how we teach, our understanding of some of the elements that are within the National Driver and Rider Standards. I would ask everyone that's listening today, have you read them? If you haven't, I would encourage you to, because it's from the National Driver Rider Standard that the 17 different competences of the standards check and the Part 3 come out. Not that, and I'm talking about competences there around an assessment, but even that's CPD, isn't it? It's developing your growth and understanding of what the DVSA are, what knowledge that you need to possess, and what standard that you need to deliver. And they're in 2 columns. If you go to the National Driver Standard, you'll see it there. So you could go through each of those and just do a little tick list and think, well, or even, I'll tell you what, let's use a coaching method here. Why don't you scale yourself on a scale of 0 to 10, and think about whereabouts you are at the moment. If 0 was don't know anything about this at all, and 10 was 100%, I'm absolutely understand that, deliver that every single lesson, and then you'll pick out maybe areas of your own development that you could look at that would make you be a better trainer, better instructor, better at helping a pupil develop and achieve goals. So all the things around the national standards, I would is all CPD. Yeah, you mentioned going to industry, just touching base on the shows that happen. There's at least a couple a year, so they're definitely worth. And I know that a lot of those have free. I know I'm doing one in October. But you can come and see me, but we can join a session. That's CPD. Or you can take one of the courses that are available by trainers, of which I'm one, and I run my own courses, which we can talk about if you like. I can give you links for. But I think that the starting point is, okay, an understanding of where you are now and where you would like to be, and where you're strong, what areas you're strong, and what areas you need to develop in order to improve what you deliver, but also order to grow your business. So there's industry magazines, that's all CPD. And some of those associations also offer courses. So when you look around, there's a lot around there that you can choose to do. But I wouldn't leave it until the letter drops through your doorstep, the brown envelope that says you're being called for a standards check or a part 3. Why would you? Because then panic will set in. Oh, am I ready to do it? Well, the thing is that it should happen every day. If you can do one thing different than you did yesterday, then you've improved yourself. If you can highlight what those things are, then that's CPD. You are personally thinking about doing something different, doing something better, and then checking yourself. Bit of reflection. How did that go? Did that work with that pupil? What did I do then? How could I do it differently? That's CPD. And if you're reflecting, you're encouraging your pupils to reflect. That's CPD. So just by assessing where you are now and what your goals are, and breaking those down and what you need to achieve and develop and grow and improve, you'll highlight some areas that you can focus on. Some of which you'll be focusing on them every single day, and that will certainly help with your development.
Awesome. Some great tips there again. But you mentioned before about I think it says 5 key things around CPD. So I'm intrigued now to see what these are.
Yeah, well, these are 5 things that I sort of, when I look back at my career in the industry, the 5 areas that where I've focused on, they've definitely improved me as a trainer, how I've delivered training, how I've helped my pupil achieve goals. And if you want to make a note of them, if you've got a pen and piece of paper, the first one, and this is no particular order, I'll talk a little bit about each one, but the first one is listening skills. And by that I mean not just listening with your ears, but I also mean listening with your eyes. So if you think about how much communication that is given off, not only verbally but through body language, and I really developed my listening skills. I wanted to know. I was inquisitive. I wanted to know why that pupil twitched like that when that particular thing happened. What was the thought process? What caused that to happen? When a pupil might say something to you about, or when you might ask a question, for example, let me give you an example. I don't like this junction. I'd want to know why those thoughts are there, because I compare it like when you go to the doctors, the doctor asks you what your symptoms and tries to figure out root cause, doesn't he or she? Yeah. So by using deep listening skills, you're perhaps listening to the symptoms and you're hearing the symptoms. But as a trainer, you want to try and delve into what might be the root cause. So active listening skills are really good. You don't want to miss anything. And you'll be quite surprised. I've been surprised when I've followed up on something, and I was really pleased I did, because it led to a conversation that completely changed the next thing I was going to do in my training. Because I picked up on something that people had said, something that people had done, and it led me to understand an emotion. It led me to understand a behavior, what their thoughts were, and why that happened. And if I hadn't have picked up on that, then that could have been a completely wrong training path to go down that wouldn't have achieved as much or as quickly. Yeah. So active listening skills. Try and spot something you haven't spotted before. Another one, number 2, rapport. We've talked a little bit about rapport and trust, haven't we? And I would lump trust in here. And it's those connections that you've got, though, that relationship, that professional relationship that you've got in car, where your rapport is sufficiently developed that you're able to ask the question and get an answer to the question. And sometimes those questions can be right deep inside, trying to understand a pupil's thoughts, what their thoughts are, or what their beliefs are, what their core beliefs are. And of course, you're an official, aren't you? you're a captain of road safety, and you are. And this is how they might see you. Yeah, you're this person who is is all knowledgeable about what's right and what's wrong and what's the law. So your pupil may have an opinion about what your opinion is, only because they might have even seen that, because of what you might have said. So when you've got good rapport, when you ask a question and a pupil might respond with, well, you might not think this, but.
Yeah.
And I love that. Yeah. Because that means that the pupil is happy to tell you what they think, even though they think it flies in the face of what your beliefs are. So really developing that really strong rapport leads to trust, and that you're then able to ask questions, and they're going to give you honest answers when you ask questions about what's going to happen after the driving test. So how do you think you might drive with your friends in the back? How do you think you might drive when you're late? How do you think you might drive when there's an emergency? How do you think you might drive when I'm not with you? When it's thrown it down with rain and you've got to get home in an hour's time and the sat-nav says it's going to be an hour and a half. How might that increase the risk? What might you do? What are the consequences? What might you do differently? How might you help that situation? What are your choices? What you could do? And you're only going to get honest answers if you've got trust and rapport. So right from day one in this business, I knew that if I needed to get a pupil to open up, they needed to trust me, which meant that I wasn't going to give them any negative feedback. I was going to be completely non-judgmental about, and they were free to express their opinion, that they weren't going to be criticized, they weren't going to be judged, they weren't going to be told, what you even thinking that for? They weren't going to be told they're stupid, they weren't going to be told they were wrong. And then that opened up a whole opportunity of responses back that really opened up the learning. So rapport, focus on that. It's a good one. The next one I've got is the use of intuition. And I want to just make a distinction between what intuition is and what assumption is. Now, when you assume something, you've already made a decision about it. But when you use your intuition, there's something not quite right, but I'm not too sure what it is yet. But I need to find out some more information to make a decision about it. Yeah. So when you've got a nice heightened sense of intuition, then you are able to pick on perhaps a pupil's emotional state. Something's not quite right with this pupil. They're not like they were last lesson. I don't know what it is, but I've got this feeling that, they aren't responding the way they normally do. And of course, when you get a situation like that, that can lead to a blockage to learning, can't it? I'm sure, Terry, you can think of lots of examples when a pupil's got into a car and there just ain't something's not quite right.
Yeah.
Or they're doing something and it's not what they would normally do in the way that they would normally do it. So that sense of intuition and tuning into the pupil's emotions and emotional state is important.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. Many years ago, a pupil got into a car and virtually everything she touched went completely haywire for about 5 minutes. And so I pulled up and I asked her the question, how are you feeling? Is everything okay? And then she burst into tears. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, is everything all right? And then she told me that she just had an argument with a boyfriend. So something wasn't right. And then it's about then having a conversation about how she feels about continuing with the lesson to start off with. an issue, and then helping the pupil to what I've come to now understand is called reframing them. Yeah, so helping them, get them in the right frame to have a not only a driving lesson, but what might happen after the driving test, and that happens. Yeah. So sense of intuition, along with your active listening skills and your rapport, will mean that you're much deeper into the people's mind and understanding what they think and what they feel. Next one on the list is feedback, open and honest feedback. Going back to the trust in rapport, if you've got an honesty about, they trust you, they'll also trust you with your feedback. And that you won't find yourself, butting heads and having arguments. Yes, I'm happy when pupils challenge. Of course I am, because I want to understand what their thought process is. And also giving open and honest feedback helps them align themselves with where the standard is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So when you've got trust and rapport, you're able to do that and accept, and seek honest, open, honest feedback. You want your pupil to be honest about how they think, how they feel, what they believe. So you can then help them the best way that they want the help.
Yeah.
So open, honest figure. That's got to be more relevant. It's more powerful, and it shows more understanding. And then the last one I had that I've highlighted as one of the 5 is, and one you thought I might have mentioned first, and like I said, there's no particular order, but creative questioning.
Yeah.
When I started, I only had 3 questions. And that's because I didn't realize I only needed 3, because the rest of them would come from the responses from those 3. And I was a bit worried that I didn't have this big coaching bank of questions in my head that I could quite easily recall a click of a finger and give them a brilliant question. I didn't need it. All I needed was honesty. All I needed was rapport. All I needed was a good open question to start off with, which was one of the 3 W's. Which the first W was what's gone well. Yeah. And then maybe, was there anything that you thought you could that didn't go so well that you picked up on? And then the last of the 3 W's, it was what will you do next time? So that's all I needed, but and that's all anyone needs, because the next question is going to come from understanding the pupil. Oh, I just let's say, oh, what's gone well? Oh, that was absolutely rubbish. But pupils do that, don't they?
Yeah.
And why do they do that?
Because they're used to being told negative stuff.
Well, yes, and it could be absolutely true. And I think society has got a little bit to blame on this, because we live in a society where we're very test focused, don't we?
Yeah.
And sometimes the way that our parenting, this is my personal view, by the way, I'm not going to back this up, but this is my own subjective experiential view. But we tend to be very test focused, not so much more now in schools, by the way. That's changed. I'm reliably informed, which is great. But parents want us to do well. They want us to get great grades and good results and push and achieve. So that can put a lot of pressure on us. So when we don't achieve, we tend to go straight for the negative. Oh, that was rubbish. I didn't do that very well. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at that. Whereas the important thing really is to help a pupil understand with your questioning that there's such a lot going well. Yeah. They need there's a balanced view. Otherwise they'll go down a negative spiral. So it's important that we help them bring that out, creative and open questions. And as I developed with my skills, I realized that I needed to, what I call, get to the nitty-gritty, particularly when you are setting a goal for the lesson, because if you've been on any training courses, and I learned about SMART goals a long time ago, but you know, if you're setting a really good goal for a lesson, it's got to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and have a time frame wrapped around it. But that S bit, the specific bit of SMART, if you are asking a question, you really want to get to the specifics, don't you? So if people might say, well, I just don't get it. Then you want to drill down a little bit. Okay, may I ask what it is about that you're not quite getting? Well, this clutch thing, I just, for some reason, it keeps jumping up. I don't understand it. And then it's okay, well, what might be causing that? So, well, I don't know. Is it something to do with how quickly I'm bringing it up? So you're trying to drill down to really get the pupil to understand, first of all, what the problem is, but then help them come up with a solution. And that's when life gets a bit easier for the trainer, actually. So good questioning technique is something that no one's born with.
Yeah.
But we can develop every day. I wasn't born with it, but we can develop every day just by using those active listening skills and listening to the pupil's response, and not jumping in too soon because they might be thinking about the question you just asked, but really helping them discover what might be the issue. You probably know, yeah, but that's your agenda. You know, the pupil, by telling the pupil, wouldn't that be easy? Oh boy, yeah, great. But learning's got to come from within. And so you're coaching till there's a lack of knowledge, and the point they go, well, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know. There could be a reason why they don't know. And it could be that they don't know, or it could be that they don't trust you yet. That rapport just isn't developed, that they can't trust you with their innermost thoughts.
Yeah.
So, I would look at to try and develop a question every day. Ask a new question if you can, or a question in a different way. Persevere a little bit, and then you'll learn that. Sometimes you can find a question that's a key to unlocking something that you never even realized was there. And that's the magic of good questions, I think. So nice open questions are good. Asked in the right place at the side of the road where learning takes place. Practice takes place on the drive.
That's brilliant. I'm going to touch back on them briefly. Before I do, actually, I'm going to mention SMART goals, because I've got a pet peeve about SMART goals in the. And I appreciate when I say this, a lot of people probably disagree with what I'm about to say, but I hate the realistic aspect of SMART goals. I call them SMART goals. Achievable is fine. A goal should be achievable. But for me, I'm going to use this podcast as an example. This podcast wasn't realistic. It wasn't realistic that I could do in my head, it wasn't realistic I could do a podcast. It wasn't realistic that I'd get 2,000 people listening. It wasn't realistic I could get people like yourself coming on this podcast. So if I'd have set a realistic goal in my head, then I won't be doing a podcast. Yeah. So I don't like that. It's achievable. I can do it, but it's not realistic. I think there's a difference there. And, you know, if we went off realistic, we'll never put a man on the moon. At least that's my take on it. But yeah, the 5 things you said there was really interesting, because I'm working on all 5 of those at the minute. They're all areas I'm trying to develop in, and I think they all interlink. You know, you can't build a rapport with someone if you're not listening properly. Yeah. But you know, this, referring to the podcast again, but this podcast has helped me so much with my listening skills, because it's about a conversation. Because I still sometimes feel a bit guilty on a driving lesson when we spend time talking. You know, I still have that thing where you see other instructors in forums or waiting rooms where they're talking to you and saying, "Oh, you're not learning if the wheels aren't turning." You know, you're in all that stuff. So I still have that nagging in the back of my head that we need to get moving. But I know that's not the case. You can learn as much, if not more, from the discussion as you can from the actual physical skill of doing it. But doing these podcasts has helped with my learning. The feedback thing is another one I've been working on, because being completely honest, I think I'm generally pretty good at giving people feedback. I'm not always great at receiving it. And students don't always give you direct feedback. You know, it's often inadvertent. You know, like you said, that you can get the feedback, and that ties in with the rapport. How are they answering your questions? Well, if they're not answering them openly and thoroughly and clearly, or they're not making eye contact, they're looking away, that's potentially because the rapport's not there. So that's feedback you're getting back from that student. And the other thing about the questions, one thing that I've changed massively recently is I talk less about the past and more about the future. So when you said, tell me what happened there, yes, I'll ask that question, or what, but then I'll also frame it as, like you said, what could be done differently? What would you do differently next time? What would you do next time? Because then rather than just focusing on what you've done, they're focusing on what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting, the 5 things you mentioned there, because they're all areas I'm trying to develop now. So yeah, really cool things. And I'm just going to tie that into something else, which is they're all part, you'll like this, they're all part of an instructor toolkit. You see where I'm going with this now. Which brings me to my next point, which is you've heard me mention Facebook groups a lot on this podcast, and I both love and loathe Facebook groups. You have your own Facebook group, which is called the Instructor's Toolkit. Just tell us a little bit about that and why that's potentially different from other groups out there.
Yeah, I've been on Facebook a long time. And it seems like forever, certainly since Facebook's been around. But quite early in my career, I recognized the value of Facebook to get your message across and to connect with people. That was the first reason for joining Facebook, just to connect with others. Going back to what you were saying earlier about, what I was saying about feeling alone in the industry. It was these Facebook groups for some PDIs and ADIs are maybe their only contact they have with the industry. So with that in mind, when I set the Driving Instructors Toolkit Facebook group up, it was to be different, and different in as much as that it was about CPD, continuous professional development. And I wanted it to be a learning space for ADIs and PDIs, a non-judgmental learning space where they felt free that they could ask a question as they would want their pupils to ask a question in the car and not feel as though the response is going to judge them. On the understanding that we are all in a different part of our learning journey, and each one of our pupils is in a different part in their learning journey, and we don't judge our pupils against another one, do we? Well, that pupil's doing better. Why isn't this pupil doing as well? That's because we're all individual and we're all on a different stage in that journey. So I wanted to create a learning space where ADIs and PDIs felt that they could ask a question and not be judged, and get a really nice response that was helpful, that maybe came from another instructor that was being helpful, or another PDI that was being helpful, that was on their part of their learning journey. So it's an invitation only group, and it's full of so many like-minded. I'm very proud of it because it's full of so many like-minded individuals that do care about the industry, that do care about each other, that do care about each other's learning journey, and are there to help. And there are teachers in there, people from a teaching background, people from a forces background, and it's a really good group of people. But also, I set it up while lockdown was on, and it helped me deliver every single day some continuous personal development topics to the group. And as well as that, we've done Zoom training together, and we've appeared in a number of Zoom sessions. So I wanted it to be different, and I think it is. And it's nice that people feel that they're able to ask some questions and won't be judged in that way. I'm not saying all Facebook groups, of course I'm not saying all Facebook groups do that, but I just wanted to create a space where people felt that they were open to ask anything and didn't hold back. And it's great that it's like that. And it gives me an opportunity to help people, which I love doing. I like helping people along their learning journey, and as an industry trainer, industry audit trainer, I want to help them be the best that they can be. So that's why I set it up, and And we're almost at 1,000 members now. It's not huge, but in comparison to some of the others. But I tell you what, it is focused. It is focused on personal development, and it's focused on how we can help each other be better than we were yesterday.
Yeah. I'm in that group, and I'm not as active in the groups I'd like to be at the minute. It's simply time constraints. But I have noticed that about yours. There's not much waffle in there. There's not much. I'm going to use the word hate. That word gets branded about a lot, but there's not much vitriol and spite. It seems to be, like I said, it's non-judgmental. There's a question or there's a topic raised, and people don't seem afraid to actually voice their opinion, which is quite refreshing for some of the groups. I'm not going to name them, but as instructors, if we're on Facebook, we all know the groups that you can go in and ask questions. In the groups you can't go in and ask questions because you're going to get abuse thrown at you, or at the very least massively questioned on why you're asking that question. So yeah, I think that yours is a great group for that, and I will post a link for that group in the show notes for this. But it's called the Instructor's Toolkit. So if you can't go over and look at the show notes, type in the Instructor's Toolkit into your Facebook search bar, and you can find it there. So we are wrapping up now. So I'm going to ask you two last questions, and I ask everyone these at the end of the show. The first one being, what advice or what tip? But what piece of advice would you leave to the industry now? You can leave one piece of advice. What would you say?
To the industry or to the individuals listening here?
Let's put it that way. The individuals listening.
I would say never judge the person sat next to you. We're all unique, and try and work on their agenda rather than yours. You might have an opinion. You might be making assumptions, and be aware that can be dangerous. But you might have some intuition. But discover, find some factual evidence around that, and really try and understand that it's not going to be easy for some pupils that are surrounded by peer groups, or they're surrounded by in training terms, we talk about the high levels of the GDE, the goals for driver education, but surrounded by social groups and maybe parents that have a different outlook and view around safety messages than we have. So I would say bear in mind that why are we doing this, and work with them. Try not to judge them, try to understand them and help them find their own solutions. If not, offer one and talk that through with them.
Excellent. And then the last question, I'm asking everyone to recommend a book. What book would you recommend? It can be fiction, non-fiction, anything you fancy. What book are you going to ask us to go away and read?
Oh, do you know what? I'm not a reader, but I do have some books. When you look at teaching and learning strategies, and we talk about, the type of pupil you've got in front of you and how they learn best. I don't like to pigeonhole people, but there are a number of ways that people like to take information in, and reading's one of them. I've never been an avid reader. I'm a visual learner, so I learn by moving pictures mainly. I love watching YouTube and clips and stuff like that because that's how I take information in. But there are, in terms of professional publications, that I really like because I can dip into them. So I can recommend a couple of those. There's one that I read recently and I dipped into in a number of different areas, called Anxiety, Panicking About Panic. And it's about Joshua Fletcher. And it really helped me understand how people suffer from a GAD, which is a general anxiety disorder, how it affects their life, and how I can understand that better and teach that to people that will have pupils with them that have these diagnosed conditions. And it's a powerful self-help book, but it's a guide for people suffering with anxiety or panic disorder. So I dipped into that, and that's useful from a training perspective. And there's one on coaching, which is by a guy called Christian van Nuremberg. And that's an introduction to coaching skills. These are very easy reads, by the way, because I'm not a reader. So again, these ones you can dip into. So I'd recommend those two. And if you haven't got it already, there's a nice book by Jed and Claire Wilmot called "Who's in the Driving Seat." I have actually read that, and again, that's another one you can dip into. And on a personal level, the one book that I did read from cover to cover was a series of short stories about the trenches in World War One, and it told the stories of each of the surviving soldiers at that time. And I really like stories, and I like the personal stories of survival and our ingenuity as people to get ourselves out of problems. So I really enjoyed that. So I'll leave you with those.
Well, as someone that'll read, you've left some interesting books there. The only one I've read from that was Who's in the Driver's Seat, which was a game changer for me. I need to go back and reread that actually because it was a real eye opener. But I'll definitely be giving those others a look. So yeah, I really appreciate you joining us today. You dropped some real insights and wisdom, and you've given us a lot of time. He may have even beaten Chris Spencer's record for the longest podcast so far. But where can people find you? Is there anything you'd like to promote?
Well, yeah, I'm happy for people to connect with me at any point. You can message me on, first of all, add me as a Facebook friend. I'm happy for you to do that, and message me with any thoughts that have come out of today. Anything around your own CPD that you would like some advice on, or some general questions, happy to do that. So you can connect with me on Facebook, on social media. I would also invite you to come and join me in the Driving Instructors Toolkit, and check us out, and feel free to ask those questions around your own personal development. So there's a couple of ways you can connect with. If you want to email me, you can email me at ray.seagrave@outlook.com, and I'm sure Terry will leave a link in the description.
Yep.
And once again, in terms of any courses I run courses on coaching skills and also instructor training skills, anything connected to the 17 different competences and the skills around delivering the the National Driver and Rider Standards. I do a 3-day, 3-evening session, running on a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Friday, and they're 3-hour sessions, and we look at the National Driver Rider Standards and the 17 different competences. So we look at lesson planning, risk management, and teaching and learning strategies, and we really get to grips with the skills to deliver all of those. So it's about those 5 things I mentioned earlier: rapport, use of intuition, feedback, open, honest feedback, listening feedback, creative, open questions, and those deep listening skills, in order to deliver the national standards and then achieve an A. So I also run one-to-one coaching sessions. So I do that via Zoom. So if you wanted a conversation with me about what your goals are, where you are now, and I can help you look at different areas of your personal development that will help you achieve some of the things you want to set out to achieve. So happy to talk, happy to have a conversation. And because at the end of the day, I know as good as I am in helping you deliver and be as good as you can be means that we reduce that 1.4 million figure down at the end of the day.
Awesome. Yeah, all links for that will be in the show notes, so you can head over there and click those. I am 40 next year, and one of my goals I'm 39 in October, so one of my goals between being 39 and 40, I want to work with 40 different driving instructors. So yes, I'll add you to that list. You will be on the list of that magnificent 40.
Thank you.
No, brilliant. I really appreciate you joining us today, Ray. It's been fantastic having you on, been picking your brains, and you've given us a wealth of knowledge and insight there. And if anyone listening, at the very least, go join Ray's group, because like I said, it is informative, it is insightful, it is non-judgmental, but I'd definitely advise checking out Ray's stuff and seeing what benefit you can get from that. So yeah, thank you for joining us today, Ray. It's great having you on.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you for the listeners. Thank you.
So thank you for listening to the show, and thank you to Ray Seagrave for joining me. I'm sure you've got some out of this show, as you will do with everyone. Ray clearly goes into a lot of thought and clearly cares deeply about what he actually does. If you're enjoying the show, make sure that you give it a like or subscribe or a follow wherever you're listening. Share it on social media, share it with your friends. Also, go check out our Patreon feed, patreon.com/the-instructor, where you'll get these episodes early every week, and you'll get all the bonus episodes coming up, like the Green Room, TES Talks, Masterminds, Contraflow Conversations, and much, much more. But for now, stay safe.
The Instructor podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
Okay, so if you're still listening to the podcast, you've now joined this super secret special segment at the end, where you're either going to get me waffling on for a minute or me asking a few quick fire questions to the guest. And Ray has been kind enough to join us or stay for an extra few minutes. So I'm going to fire some questions at him now and just see what his answer to these. So first of all, I'm going to start off with possibly the most important question of all. Ray, dog or cat?
Or cat.
Oh, bad answer. Bad answer. What's your favourite film of all time?
Well, that's got to be Saving Private Ryan. Love the first 15 minutes. Amazing. And the stories about the soldiers that struggled on that D-Day was amazing.
Excellent choice. Now, I know you said you're not the biggest fan of books, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you have a favourite book?
Do I have a favourite book? Oh, not that I can recall, no.
Okay. Would you ever consider going vegan?
I might. Yes, I might. And the world might need to do that soon, apparently.
What is your proudest achievement in life?
My two children, my two boys. A couple of weeks ago, Josh, my youngest son, just graduated from Leicester University with a first honours MSc in physics and mathematics. He's going into the space industry and he's going to have lasers on a Perseverance mission to Mars.
Awesome. Did not see that coming. And then the last question I'm going to ask you. Give me one goal that you've got for the remainder of your life, one thing that you want to achieve going forward.
In my current role as a training and driving instructor industry, I want to have a much broader impact, much bigger impact, so we can reduce the number of deaths on the road. I would love that. Brilliant.
Well, thank you for staying back to give us all your questions, Ray. Interesting choices. I like that, except for the dog-cat one. Dogs are better. But yeah, if you every end of every episode, I'm going to just chuck in an extra couple of bonus minutes for anyone that stays all to the end. And don't tell anyone, don't go and cheat it. They've got to stay to the end to find for themselves.